Hey youth fam, it's Brandon, the youth pastor at Simple Church. And today I get the opportunity of closing out our series, Canceled. And as we've been going through this series, I've realized there is just this love-hate relationship with celebrities. I mean, maybe you're like me and you look at all these famous people and begin to wonder why they are so famous and successful when people dislike them so much. I mean, maybe for you, it's Justin Bieber or Miley Cyrus, Nicki Minaj, Logan Paul, Cardi B, Billie Eilish, Post Malone, or Donald Trump. Whether it's one of these people I've named or somebody else, because of some of these decisions or choices these celebrities have made, it becomes easy and sometimes even fun to hate these people. We love to hate them. But the reality is the only reason we can love the hate we may have for these celebrities is because it doesn't really affect us. Why? Because we don't actually have a relationship with them. But what about the people in our lives we do have a relationship with? What about the people who have really affected us? What about those we have a legitimate reason to hate? I mean, maybe for you, it's a friend who backstabbed you, or a teacher who rails on you constantly, or maybe a bully who won't leave you alone, or a girlfriend or boyfriend who cheated on you, or maybe it's even a parent who is never really there for you. Whether it's online, in our families, or in our circle of friends, there's never a shortage of people we love to hate, especially when we feel there's a good reason for that hatred. When someone hurts us, it's tempting to cancel them by loving to hate them, talking poorly about them, dehumanizing them, or even taking revenge on them. I mean, I'll never forget my French teacher in high school. For whatever reason, she had it out for me. She would call me out in front of class, would rail on me when I didn't have the right answer, and even called me stupid in front of the whole class. And man, I hated her. I wanted her to pay. I even tried to plot with my friends on how to get her fired. And whether your story's similar to mine or not, it's stuff like this that is just complicated, right? Like when we're hurt, of course we want to stick up for ourselves and hold people accountable for their actions. But God also calls us to forgive and show grace rather than seeking revenge. So how do we do that? Well, last week we heard the story of David and King Saul, and we focused mostly on Saul, but this week I want to look back at that story and focus on David. And so in case you need a recap, Saul was the king of Israel, but David had been chosen by God to be the next king. Saul liked David at first, but he eventually became incredibly envious of David. And because of his envy, Saul tried to kill David repeatedly, over and over. He even rallied his army of soldiers to help them hunt and kill David. And so I think most of us would agree that David had a valid reason to hate Saul. It would have been totally reasonable for David to want revenge and even take it. But here's what happened instead. We read in the scriptures, after Saul returned from fighting the Philistines, he was told that David had gone into the wilderness of En-Gedi. So Saul chose 3,000 elite troops from all Israel and went to search for David and his men near the rocks of the wild goats. At the place where the road passes some sheepfolds, Saul went into a cave to relieve himself. But as it happened, David and his men were hiding farther back in that very cave. Now's your opportunity, David's men whispered to him. Today, the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do with as you wish. And so David crept forward and cut off a piece of hem off of Saul's robe. But then David's conscience began bothering him because he had cut Saul's robe. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this to my Lord the king. I shouldn't attack the Lord's anointed one, for the Lord himself has chosen him. So David restrained his men and did not let them kill Saul. So what's the lesson we should take from this story? Just let people walk all over us? Let people get away with injustice? Kill your enemies with kindness? Nah, I don't think so. Because like we did last week, it's helpful when reading Old Testament stories to look ahead to the words of Jesus and see what he had to say. And in what is considered to be one of his greatest teachings of all time, this is what he had to say when it comes to our enemies. You have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. You have heard the law that says love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good. And he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. As he often did, Jesus flipped the script on the world's wisdom about love and hate. Instead of telling his audience to love those who love them and to hate those who hate them, Jesus challenged them and us to try something new, to love our enemies. So although David lived many years before Jesus spoke these words, David understood God wouldn't want him to return Saul's hatred with more hatred. His decision to show Saul love instead of vengeance points to Jesus' challenge for us. Love the people we want to hate. So how do we do what David did? How do we practice what Jesus teaches? Well, I think it starts with asking 2 questions. First, who is your enemy? Who are you tempted to hate because of the way they've hurt or treated you? Who have you hurt out of a desire for revenge? Who do you go back and forth with in an exchange of hatred and retaliation? Who do you strategically choose to hate? You see, when someone hurts us, it's natural to want to cancel them and make them pay. But it's possible to hold someone accountable for their actions without adding to the hatred in the world. But to do this, we have to ask a second question. What does love require of me? In John 13:34-35, Jesus tells us to love each other and that it is our love for one another that will prove to the world we are his disciples. Jesus gives a new way to live, a better way to live. And the world needs us to model this new way forward. The way of love, not hate. It will be challenging, but most important things are. This change can start with you by deciding to do just a couple things. First, you can decide to forgive. Forgiveness is for more than just the person who hurt us. It's something we do for ourselves and for God. Whether they've asked for our forgiveness or not, we can choose to let go of and be free of the bitterness we have toward the people who have hurt us. We can forgive others despite their choice to change or not, because that is exactly what God did for us. Now, you may not be ready to fully forgive that person today, and that's okay. Forgiveness is often a journey, but I promise you it is so worth it. Second, you can decide to notice. It can be difficult to stay motivated to love your enemies when it seems like no one else is doing it. We all need people to model for us what compassion and love look like. But the good news is that these examples are everywhere. We just have to pay attention. You can choose to look for the good God is doing through others rather than focus on the bad others are doing through our world. Third, you can decide to defend. We've talked a lot about what to do when we've been hurt, but don't forget that other people are being hurt as well. You might notice someone being bullied at school, or you might begin to explore deep and systemic problems like injustice, racism, and inequality. I mean, if you were David, wouldn't you want somebody to have defended you? Well, the reality is we can do that for others. And finally, you can decide to pray. The things we've talked about today are difficult. If we want to choose love instead of hate, we're going to need a lot of help. We have to learn to pray for those who've hurt us or who are hurting others, just like Jesus said. And as you do, you'll find it's hard to hate someone you're consistently praying for. So as we close, I want to challenge you to pray for the person you're most tempted to hate right now. Ask God to help you choose love instead of revenge. But as I say all this, I get it. It's hard not to hate. Some of you have been really hurt, and the people you hate probably deserve the hatred you have toward them. But here's what I want you to know. Hurt in response to hurt Hate in response to hate has never made the world a better place. It has never inspired people or changed them for the better. Just think of what people like Adolf Hitler have done. But on the flip side, think of what others have done who chose love instead of hate. Think of people like Abraham Lincoln, considered to be one of the greatest presidents of all time, who said, "I destroy my enemies when I make them my friends." Or people like Martin Luther King Jr., who needs no introduction. And he said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." And it's people like this, with a mindset and attitude of valuing love over hate, that have made a mark on history and changed our world for the better. And you have that same choice. If we choose to hate our enemies, hate will only grow. But if we choose to love our enemies with God's help, that love will grow, spread, and even change our culture. It's not going to be easy, but it is worth it. Like Jesus said, and like David did, God's challenging you to love the people you want to hate, and see how it changes you, changes them, and changes the world.